So everything was sort of just inspired by the material, and we did as much practical as we could.
It was really simply an excuse to see if I could get away with drawing monsters for a living.
It's almost like getting up for work. We could all relate to that sometimes. And he's no bullshit kind of guy.
There's all these contradictions. Like, he's a very human, compassionate character, and crazy shit is going on. There's demons and all this.
This is my trouble. Like, how do I explain this without spoiling anything?
Big shoes to fill. You've seen, I'm sure, the original film with
boots.
Guillermo. Big boots to fill.
Yeah.
I am told this film has a lot of practical effects, so you had to spend all that time in the makeup. What was it like for you when you saw yourself first becoming Hellboy?
Surreal, disbelief, surreal, nerve-wracking slightly. Just how are we going to tackle this? It's a one-off experience, right? You don't ever, how often do you put on a full prosthetic suit and all the jazz and acting it every day, right? But I didn't give it too much thought because I would get lost in my head. I just took it one scene at a time, one day at a time. And I'm always up for a challenge, so it was challenging, and I'm super grateful I did it. I'm happy it came my way.
So this question's for my son, actually.
Okay.
Huge Hellboy, read all the graphic novels,
Cool.
Huge Hellboy fan. So what nuances and smaller details did you find in the screenplay that helped you tap into Hellboy, that made you know, okay, this is who this character is, and this is how I want to play him? Were there any specific nuances that you found in the screenplay or in the reading of the script that helped you get into the character?
I think his almost jadedness of his job, of like almost summoned to do this field of work.
Evil
and he's
creature
just so
again,
over it.
number
And,
300.
Oh, wow, yeah, exactly. I really love that because it's almost like getting up for work. We could all relate to that sometimes. And he's no bullshit kind of guy. You know, it's not like, oh my, he's just, you know, kind of, I get that very well. So, yeah, that little idiosyncrasy, and definitely smoking. Like, he had him smoking in the 50s. I still like to smoke, you know? So I was like, this is going to be fun.
That was cool.
No
So it was a
smoke
good anchor
breaks
for you.
right there. Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What are some of the influences that led to the creation of Hellboy as a character?
Oh, going way back. I always wanted to draw monsters. It's really as simple as that. I had done 10 years of stuff for Marvel and DC. I actually made up a Batman story that was a supernatural story. This was the first, sort of writing I had done on a comic. And when I came off that, I went, wow, it's cool being able to do my own stuff. I'm not really a superhero artist. And I thought if I could do stories like this with my own character, then I'd really have it made. But I didn't want to draw a regular person. I wanted to draw a monster. So it was like a regular dude who just happens to be red with a tail, which I thought was just hilarious. And that was it. It was really simply an excuse to see if I could get away with drawing monsters for a living. And, it worked out. And then little by little over the years, you kind of figure out, well, who is this guy?
So he wants to know what the art style of Hellboy. It's so distinct. It's so unique with the shading under the eyes. How hard was that? How hard was it to convey that on film? Because of course, switching from the paper to the screen is a challenge in itself. But with such a distinct style, how did you tackle that?
Right. So, well, we were trying to adapt the original book as close as we could, and it's a horror story. It's a folk horror story. So we were making a folk horror movie. There was no doubt about that. So it's a movie with dark things in the woods and witches and creepy cabins and things
About
like
time.
that. Yeah. So that's the world we're in. So it's going to be dark. There's going to be a lot of black ink on that page, and so we put a lot of black ink on the screen and try to just light it and shoot it as moody and sort of as dark as the original books.
Awesome. Now, his follow-up question, with Ron Perlman relying heavily on practical effects and David Harbour's movie relying heavily on CG, what was when you got handed this film, which one did you want to go with, practical or CG?
Well, this all comes from the story, right? So I didn't look at it as we're rebooting Hellboy or we're doing some new take on Hellboy. I looked at it as adapting a story, the same way you would adapt a Stephen King story. You're adapting a classic story by a master creator, and we're going to do it as close and as authentic as we can. And so the story sort of lets you know what it wants to be. Because this was a more indie, grounded, kind of like creepy horror iteration of the character, I mean, you want to have more practical effects if you can, because it feels good. You don't want exotic purple monsters with 20 tentacles. You want it to be sort of real animals that really could be in the woods, but they're just bigger and weirder. So everything was sort of just inspired by the material, and we did as much practical as we could.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see it, and I'll pass it along. But my son did ask Mike if you could please draw more Ghost Rider. One of his favorite characters.
Ghost Rider?
Yeah, you're not a comic book artist, but he loved the Ghost Rider. He did see of you that you drew, and he just asked for that.
You notice he didn't ask that I direct more Ghost Rider.
That's a
Not gonna
funny
lie,
one.
he was concerned. I liked it. I was a fan, but I was a teen. I was younger at that time. I loved it. Spirit of Vengeance. I'm in.
Concerned.
Yes, this is a very cool but ominous character. Made a bad deal, and now has to try to get his soul back. As you said, what was? Did you read the graphic novel first of all? Did you get a chance to?
I did, yeah. I read the script first. So the first thing I read was the screenplay, which Mike worked on and Brian worked on, and the script was incredible. And then I read the graphic novel, and it was such a delight to see those images. The characters leap off the page. The Crooked Man is like that illustration is very uncanny. It's very upsetting. It really leaps off the page at you. It's very vivid. Yes, so as soon as I read the graphic novel, I was desperate to participate in this.
Yes. Now, was there any practical effects on scene that got you? Like, because this is a very scary film, and
Yeah.
we're told that there's a lot of practical effects.
Yes.
Was there a specific scene, without spoiling anything, that got you rattled, or you were like, all right, that one's going in the nightmare chamber?
Oh, yeah, there were tons. Almost all of the effects were practical, and the prosthetics were amazing. So Martin, the actor who played the Crooked Man, we would only really see him in costume. If you're wearing this level of prosthetics, you come in 4 or 5 hours before everyone else to
Yeah.
get that work done. It takes a long time off in a separate area. So for 2.5 months, I didn't really see Jack Kesey. I just saw Hellboy. And I didn't really see Martin. I just saw the Crooked Man. And it's the Crooked Man particularly is such a skin-crawling, uncomfortable presence, and Martin's performance is it's very physical. It's a very physical, strange posture. Yeah, I found it very unsettling. And my character is terrified of his character, so it worked out
Yes.
great. It
Yeah.
really worked out just perfect.
It's like the clock is running down throughout the film.
Exactly.
On his
It really
character.
feels like there's this terrible gravity. And the first time the Crooked Man shows up, there was this sequence where he's just sort of walking towards us from like 50 yards away. And he's sort of outside the light, and he's sort of slowly getting closer. You know that shot? I think it's in Skyfall where Javier Bardem is like walking towards Daniel Craig. It really felt like that. It was just this like, oh, he's getting closer and closer and closer. It was very
And
uncomfortable.
time just goes even slower
No,
as it
exactly.
approaches.
It's excruciating. Yeah.
Okay, so you said you've read the.
Is this you right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that it? Yeah.
So you said you've read the graphic novel.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you read from the character that you're like, all right, this is gonna inform my performance, or did you want to try to come at it in a different angle?
It's a little bit of both. You know, the script is so faithful to the graphic novel that everything is kind of inherently informed by that. You know, like the character in the film is experiencing almost exactly what the character in the graphic novel experienced. What I did love is you get a real sense from the illustration of the character and the way he's written in the graphic novel. He's really, I think Brian described him as like it was such a good description, like a cat with a long tail in a room full of doors. It was like he had this amazingly vivid description. It feels like Tom, in every direction, things are coming to get him. You know, like things are coming through every crevice at the edge of the frame to swallow him up, you know? And so he has to kind of always keep his head on a swivel. And that was really easy on our set because the environments were so richly created. The performances were so vivid. It felt like my job was just to stay open to everything around me and try to stay aware of everything in the room. And that did a lot of the work for me.
Because you've read the story, what was it when you were looking at Richard Corbin's art that made you just like you were excited to see recreated in real life?
I mean, it really is that character, the Crooked Man, and Effie Kolb. Like, it's such a she's such an interesting contradiction in that book because she sort of looks like a young woman, but she's like an ancient evil witch. In the book, she's there was a really lovely description in the screenplay of her flying away, just kind of the floating. And all of those sequences, you read them on the page, you see them in the book, you're like, how the fuck do you do this in the movie? Like, how do you possibly do this in the movie? And the actor who played Effie Kolb is this actor, Leah McNamara, who's an incredible Irish actor. And she had to do some shit. I'm on a show called Yellowstone, that's a cowboy show. So we work with horses a lot. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for working with horses. I've done it a ton. I know how hard it is. She had to do this sequence where she rode in on the back of a horse with a wire attached between her and a tree. She had to get off the horse, move around the horse, kind of, people who've read the book know the horse has a special significance. She had to kind of work her way around the horse and sort of dance with it a little bit and then fly away. And that is an incredibly challenging thing to do with a real live animal. We're talking about a real horse here. They hate wires, they hate boom poles, they hate light stands. So all of her movement really came right out of the book. There's an incredible sort of chilling sequence in the book too, where she's sitting in a tree branch, and Leah also had to do that, sit on a tree branch hooked up to a wire so she can fly away from it. And she was so amazing at like being, it's weird as an actor when you're tied into all this stuff, you're thinking about all this stuff, you're thinking about, okay, 3, 2, 1, here comes the pull. You have to be really ready for all this technical stuff. And Leah was so amazing at staying so present and in the moment and so focused even while all this other shit is going on. Yeah, she's amazing. Her and Martin both. I wish they were here today because they really bring the movie to life. Those characters, I feel like the Crooked Man and Effie Kolb are both such vivid characters in the book, and those performances, I'm excited for people to see them.
Wait, so
Now, about that moment in the screenplay
yeah.
with the horse and the significance
Yeah.
of it, what was your reaction when you read that in the screenplay and that was revealed to you?
It's so strange. It's such an interesting, it's a very Hellboy moment because I feel like Hellboy always combines humanism and like these really real sort of deep primal feelings with the fantastic in a really unique way. You know, there's all these contradictions. Like he's a very human, compassionate character and crazy shit is going on. There's demons and all this. So that I feel like that image that I'm excited for people to see is
Let you know
really
what the
an
stakes were in the
expression
film,
of
didn't
that.
it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's really an expression of that uniquely Hellboy feeling.
That's awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for
yeah,
your
of
time.
course. Thank you guys. Great to meet you all.
So you said a little bit about the character going out in the field for the first time and getting in over her head. For you as an actress, was there a scene where it got real, like it got real scary? Did they go with the practical effect that had you like, wow, this is terrifying?
There is a sequence in the end where this is my trouble of like, how do I explain this without spoiling anything? Okay, there's a sequence in the end where she is on her own, and it was a very, I feel like, an intimate scene in terms of, you know, when you're acting and you're just trying to dive into the emotions on your own in this dark place. It was amazing, and it wasn't, I wouldn't necessarily maybe say scary, but it was, you know, it took me a while to get out of that place for a second, you know? You're kind of immersed in it. I know I said a lot of nothing, but...
That's good. That's good. How about the physical preparation for the role? How was that? Did you get to do any stunts or any practical
Yeah,
stuff?
so I did meet Jack, like, during our stunt training. Having said that, my stunt training involved me hiding behind Hellboy. They're like, what does Jack do, and where do we put Addie?
Which
Anywhere
is
else
the
behind?
safest tactic when you're in the mix, yes.
Exactly. Leave it to Hellboy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.